15 minutes per minute of video editing. And that's on the lighter side. A lot of the channels out there have significantly more time. A lot of that is like looking for screenshots or clips, like trimming them to just the right size, doing all the cropping and stuff like that. So for this, no visual aids. There's nothing else. I've got a script in front of me, but I'm going to do it live so that I don't have to worry about editing. And that's my gift to myself. And my gift to you guys is I'm going to be talking about, hey, Joey. I'm going to be talking about the future of the channel, what ideas I have moving forward for what I'm going to be doing, and based on what I hear from the people on the live, we might prioritize some videos over others. So as most people who watch the channel probably realize, Archetype Builds is about builds, about D&D builds, making character builds, which is highly aligned with the D&D optimization community, right? So there are lots of people like Trey Monk's Temple and Pack Tactics and D4. D4 is really the one who got me into this, loving those videos and the style of those videos and the way that he created those builds. And a lot of those channels, when they post builds, they will post a 60-minute video, right? Now, a lot of people who love D&D love to get into the nitty-gritty of build and love to go through it, and really they want that full hour of analysis and going through each spell and each ability and all the different circumstances you can use it for. My observation was that there was a gap, essentially, where there was lots of people who were new-ish to D&D. They didn't have all the books. They didn't want all the books. And the priority for them was, I've been told I can kind of play as whatever. I have this general idea that you can flavor something, right? You can if you're wielding a crossbow, you can pretend like you're shooting, you can be Spider-Man shooting web bolts. You can flavor abilities over the mechanics. You're sort of aware of the concept. You don't know all the mechanics that are available, and you go here's my idea. I just need the mechanics to fit this idea. So that's Archetype Builds. That was the impetus for the channel. And a year ago, I made sure I had 5 videos already made before the channel even started, right? Before I even changed the name of the channel to Archetype Builds and got the logo and everything. I already had 5 of those build videos. And I've loved making them. They've been really incredible, and I do think that that they are good work and useful, right? They're short enough that if you are playing D&D in an hour, you can queue up an Archetype Builds video, you can listen to it, and you can create your character sheet in using that information within that hour. And I'm really proud of that, and I think it's a useful tool. There's also character sheets for all of those builds on my Patreon for level 1, level 3, and level 10 of each build. So if you are starting D&D and you're like, I want to play a ninja, and you find the ninja video, you can, for $1, get that character sheet, and you're already ready to play at the table, which I think that is much more useful than something like, there's lots and lots of optimization videos out there about the Storm Sorcerer, combining that with the Tempest Cleric and doing a 20-level build on that. I don't think that represents how people play D&D. I think people play D&D, they have a concept in mind, they want the mechanics to match, and they want to do it quickly. So that's kind of where this channel started from. What I've seen is that, generally speaking, I'm sure that those videos are useful tools for the people who are experiencing that. But they are not going to see those videos, and they're not going to watch them because they're not aware of them. Right. This channel is very small. It's continued to remain pretty small. So I doubt that those videos are really hitting the audience that cares about those sorts of videos. So instead, obviously, the people who are on YouTube, who are looking for new channels, who want to add additional channels to their viewing, are people who care a lot about D&D, right? People who are really into it and do have all the books and do know all the mechanics and are aware of this wide variety of character options. So I think that's where I'm looking to sort of start leaning into with this channel is a little bit more towards that group. I think those are the people who are actually interested in watching, and maybe those people will see some of my other build videos and they will recommend it to a friend who's saying, oh, I want to play like a frost-based character. What should I do? Like, which class should I pick for ice? And that's kind of a difficult question unless you've got an ice princess build. Or like, I want to play as a Disney princess who befriends animals. What should I build that? And that's a difficult question unless you've got my Disney princess build. So that's my goal really is now I think I'm on those build videos. I've got a few more left in the tank, but really the goal now for me is to grow the channel to where people might actually see those build videos at some point in their careers as D&D players. So coming up on the channel, a couple of the builds that I still have not yet done. I have a speedster build that has been marinating on the back burner for a long time. This is, essentially a character who goes really fast, and that their whole thing is, they are trying to use that speed to the greatest advantage. So I could sit down and scribble out a build that goes as fast as is physically possible. But if a new player picks up that build, I would feel disingenuous allowing them to play like that, because the truth is that's not going to be very helpful, right? They're not actually going to excel at the table in any way with just movement speed. So what you have to do is you have to find a way to make use of that movement speed. So it's tempting to, do monk. I've seen some homebrew monk options that essentially will say like, oh, for each different target during your turn, you deal an extra d6 with your martial arts attack. So you hit one person, it's a d6 plus, dexterity. If you hit two people, that's the first person gets a d6 plus dexterity. The second person gets 2d6 plus dexterity. The third person gets 3d6 plus dexterity. So essentially you are like, if you spread your targets, you ramp up. And that's similar to like the Drunken Master Monk has something similar to that, where multi-target damage is actually, multi-target martial damage is like the niche of the monk, right? So imagine that, but like for a specific build that is like a speedster that's trying to like deal damage to a bunch of different people using a lot of movement speed. I tried to make that work. It's ultimately what I kept getting drawn back to was the Ashardalon Stride spell. And that spell weaponizes movement speed in a way that nothing else in the game does. It's the only conversion from movement speed to useful damage output. And so Ashardalon's Stride is a high-level spell. The damage scales with your spell level. So all of a sudden, instead of doing a monk or a rogue or like a fun multi-class build, you're talking about basically doing a tabaxi wizard, right? And I don't think that's anyone's mental image of what a speedster should be. But I'm stuck in this position of like, I want these builds to be useful. I want them to actually do something. And I want them to be true to like the theme of the build. So that's where that script is stuck in limbo in between a true speedster and a Ashardalon Strider. But that's, at some point I will make that. I spent a lot of time on that build. I've also been looking into a jester build, something that is like comedy focused. This is probably going to be some kind of bard, and actually my main problem is justifying the jester as its own archetype separate from the bard class. But it will be focused on buffing allies and using psychic damage on enemies. And I'm going to see how that goes, right? And there's always the possibility, I might rename that the clown or something like that. And there's always the possibility of making that into like a terrifying clown if you want to. Like, you can be the Pennywise of the group. So that is a build that I'm also working towards. My main issue there is just like, how is this not just a bard? And I am working to find some mechanical niches that satisfies. I've also considered going through the, obviously the channel is called Archetype Builds, and that's because, of all the different words that encapsulate, this kind of idea of this prime central concept that all of these different characters like draw from, right? Archetype is probably the coolest, sounding word of those, right? It could have been something else, but I liked Archetype as to represent that the concept of a ninja or the concept of a Disney princess or something. It's that core central conceit within each of these different examples. However, there's another example of the word archetype being used that is very common in fiction and other things, and that is the Jungian archetypes, right? This is Carl Jung is whatever you have to say about him, an extremely influential psychologist. I studied psychology. My college mentor was a big Jungian humanist. And so I think it would be interesting to take a look at his archetypes and kind of make a D&D build for each one. I have looked at those, and I can already tell you right now, like those would be like some level 1 builds. Like they're not, they're very, very, they are not well oriented towards a combat RPG, but I think it would be kind of fun to do that anyway. They're more like personality types. So I have been working on a Jungian archetype script that might come out at some point this year, if there's interest in that. And I think that would just be fun. I also am aware that certain, let's call them disciples of Jung, are not great role models. I happen to think that Carl Jung was a pretty great psychologist and did some really pioneering work, but certainly he's been interpreted in a lot of different ways, and some of those interpretations tend towards sacrificing practicality in favor of a narrative, right? It's about making meaning of the world, and sometimes people make some meaning that leaves others out. So there are some not so great figures in popular culture that are influenced by Jungian archetypes. So that's another reason that video is kind of like sitting in purgatory. Is I never really get around to finishing it because I'm a little afraid to put that out there and have that connotation. But definitely something that's in the works. And then I have a series of team builds, which I think are really fun. These are thematically consistent, mechanically consistent builds that you could like maybe take to your team and say like, hey, we're all starting a new one shot. What if we were all, each one of us represented a different one of the 4 elements and built our characters around that? Or what if, we were like the nocturnal squad and all of us had darkness flavored abilities and excelled in darkness. So those are the kind of team builds that I am working on. I think those would be really fun. I know D4 does partner builds sometimes, like with 2 players. I think it'd be neat. My team builds tend to have 4 players, just to like have a couple of those out there, so that if people wanted to, they could like take that video and make the pitch to their group and say like, hey, what if we did this? So those are of the archetype builds. That's really what's left on the docket, and that's I don't know what that was, like 4 videos, right? So 4 videos is not very many, even at my slower production pace with the new job. So I have started to think about what new content I want to deliver. One of the things you might wonder is like, well, why is there no like sage archetype build? That's one of the things I mentioned in my first video, the longbow archer, and then I had the knight in shining armor immediately afterwards. And I said in both those videos that like the longbow, the knight in armor, and the wizard are like the 3 main archetypes of these fantasy RPGs. And so the question was like, why would I not just make like the sage or the wizard or something like that? Make the Gandalf, make the Dumbledore, make the exactly like that thing that you have in your mind. And the tough reason is because there's nothing that video would add to the conversation that the wizard class doesn't add. Sure, you can make a knowledge cleric, you can make, a lore bard or something and flavor them as a sage old man. There's plenty of stuff that you could do. The sad truth is this is one of those ones that Wizards of the Coast just nailed, and there's really nothing for me to add. to this archetype. But yeah, if there's like a particular sage build that you think would be really, really great, I would love to hear about it, because I'm just sitting there going like, just pick wizard and roleplay Dumbledore, roleplay Gandalf. It's not like, because the longbow archer, you sort of have to ask the question like, well, who's best at using longbows? What are the best options available to me for doing that? You don't really have to ask those questions about the sage, because the sage is going to be casting their spells. So they're going to be a spellcasting class. They're going to be either intelligence or wisdom based, but you don't want the god angle usually to be intelligence based. You're going to cast spells, and you don't need anything else, besides that. So, so that's I've had justifying that video, so I deleted that script. But yeah, that's kind of the missing baseline one for like a truly new player. Genuinely has never read the books. They're like, I got invited to D&D and know nothing about it. I want to be Dumbledore. I want to be Gandalf. How do I do that? I just don't have it in me to make a video that says just take 10 levels of wizard and don't look back. That's not a video I'm going to dedicate some time to. But those truly are all of the upcoming builds that I have planned. I've almost exhausted that supply, right? So I do have some ongoing series. My subclass ranking videos consistently get some of the lower end of views on the channel. So it's not something that a lot of people seem to be interested in. I have the Rogue, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard left. 4 more ranking videos before all of the subclasses in D&D have been ranked by me. And then we could do some fun stuff, right? We can do some best overall class and subclass, the highest like niche. Like if you pick like, I want to do like these two or three things, what's the best subclass for those 2 or 3 things? We can do numerical analysis. We can look at the S tiers for each role. Who are the best healers? Who are the best, front lines, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of potential analysis videos once that series is done. But again, these videos coming out and showing consistently low rankings, I've continuously like put off doing these, because this doesn't seem to be the kind of content that is really hitting home for a lot of the audience. Speaking of not hitting home for a lot of the audience, I put out a video, how many D&D characters are there? This video took an incredible amount of analysis from me. It's basically, the idea was all of the different choices you have, there's so many, but it is a finite number. There's a finite number of choices that you can make in between choosing your class and choosing your feat and choosing your race and choosing your spells and choosing your fighting styles and invocations. There's so many different options, and they multiply each other, because a Tabaxi warlock with the mystic or with the Cloak of Flies invocation is different from a Grung warlock with the Cloak of Flies invocation, right? So every choice multiplies every other choice, but there is a finite number. It is countable. So my goal with that video was just for level 1, just taking like you're starting at first level, how many different D&D characters could you potentially make mathematically? Like, what's the number? And it was an impossible video to do. Going through all of the skills and trying to eliminate double counting and worrying about prerequisites. And I just had to throw equipment to the side. And then I was like, do I care about equipment proficiencies? Like, do different weapon proficiencies count? So there's a lot of decisions I had to make. And when I finished up, came out to something in the region trillion possible level 1 characters. Which is obviously more than the number of D&D characters that have been or ever will be made, if you add them all up. Or at least ever will be played, right? There's a lot of characters that get made and don't get played. But yeah, so and obviously some of those are some terrible options, and some of those are literally the same wizard in almost every way with like 1 spell difference, right? So are those 2 different characters? It's hard for me to say, precisely, but that's where I drew the line. Actually, the vast majority of that 3 trillion number are wizards. because wizards have the highest number of spells known and the largest spell list, so their combinatorics work out to be a much bigger number than everyone else, which means, right, that they take the lion's share of the overall character options. So it's something like it's something like 2 trillion wizards and then 1 trillion other characters is how many characters you can create at level 1. So I made that video. It took me weeks, literally weeks of sitting at the spreadsheet, counting up all the lists, doing all the multiplications, checking the math to make sure that it was correct. And it did incredibly poorly. It was one of my worst reviewed videos. So in terms of like the time it takes for me to work on a video versus the amount of time people actually watch, I'm pretty sure that's still the only video where the ratio is whatever, less than 1, greater than 1. That I did more work on that video than people have spent time watching it. Period. Which is a terrible ratio as a creator. A terrible ratio. These 1D&D videos are something like, for every hour of my time creating the video, it's been watched like 100 hours. Literally, like that. It's supposed to be like 1 to 100, and this one was probably 1 to 1 or like 1 to 0.5. So I had been planning on doing a follow-up for each level. So like, how many level 2 characters can you make? How many level 3? I am not going to do that. That series is done. That series is canceled. That's not going to continue. But I think it was a neat video. Maybe, it's a hard marketing pitch to say, like, aren't you curious to know how many different characters that can be created? So maybe they'll give it a watch. And if it suddenly skyrockets in popularity, maybe I'll continue that series. But for now, I'm assuming that is never going to happen again. So that takes me to 1D&D, right? I've been doing a lot of 1D&D videos. Those are consistently and majorly the most popular on the channel. And we are closing in on the end of the 1D&D experiment. So they probably are going to get 2 more playtests out. That's my guess. Maybe 1 for the rest of this year, 2023. And then we would be lucky to get 1 more at the start, in January, essentially, right? I can only assume that it's been a really long break since we've seen the last playtest that had like some solid content in playtest 7, right? Playtest 7 had a lot of classes and a lot of features, and the one before that, playtest 6, had a lot of classes and a lot of features. And then 8 had nothing related to any of those. 8 was very specifically a filler while they work on finalizing these classes. So I'm guessing we're going to get 1 or 2 more play tests, and then we're done with 1D&D, and they're going to print the books, and that's going to be the way we play from now on. So in terms of 1D&D videos, there's got to be some choices made, right? On one hand, these changes are going to affect what we would call, right, how every class relates to every other class is changed now. These different mechanics are present, and especially a lot of classes that are pretty weak today are becoming stronger in the future, and maybe those interactions change, and so there's a lot of fertile new ground for builds. So starting in the spring of 2024, I think it's highly likely that this channel will become heavily dedicated to builds in the 1D&D meta. As a matter of fact, I've already dipped my toes with the Viking that is fully 1D&D compatible, and that video did very well. In terms of my build videos, it's in the top 3. It's an all-time high build, and I think the fact that it's 1D&D, they're already made for 1D&D, is pretty relevant to those numbers. So it certainly seems like I'll be doing more builds in the 1D&D system. But as I just mentioned like a few minutes ago, I'm out of archetypes. I don't really have a lot of ideas for new themes to build around. So probably where we go from here is redoing these older videos that I made when I was a young content creator. I didn't have the camera I have now. this is a bad example because I'm using my laptop right now, but in the past I had even worse video, and usually I have a better one. But I had worse video, I had worse audio, I had not refined my editing techniques. Things are a little bit choppier, my delivery is a little choppier. So maybe where this channel goes is in a circle. And I start redoing, maybe from the beginning, do the longbow archer, do the knight in shining armor, redoing these older videos in one D&D rule set, and asking the question, like, do these multi-classes make sense anymore? Is this going to be compatible or competitive at the table? What are some other options that I can choose? And I can't really start that process until I've seen everything, because if I haven't seen everything, then it's like, why are you going to me to choose your build if I don't know what feats are available? I don't know, what new races they're going to print in the book. They've also said there's going to be content in there that we've never seen in the playtest. Like, they're just going to not playtest it. So all of that factors into these decisions, because maybe I go back and I redo the longbow archer and I feel pretty good about it. And then one of the things they didn't tell us about at all was, a new elven accuracy feat where if you're an elf, you automatically hit your first hit or whatever it is. And then that changes all the interactions, and I have to go back to the drawing board. So I'm not going to start on that process until the new D&D 5th edition books are out, like published and available. I'm going to read through them, and I'm going to get started on redoing all of those old builds. So that's going to probably be a big part of where this channel pivots to, is higher quality 1D&D archetype build videos starting this spring. I do have some other series, though, that I'm considering introducing. And this is where, I think we're pretty much at the point where I would love input on which of these sound more interesting to you guys, because that's going to determine where I put my efforts in, right? Like I mentioned, the purpose of the channel is to create these archetype build videos that are most useful for newer D&D players who are looking to get caught up on a build and the mechanics behind the build in 20 or 30 minutes, and then be at the table with their gaming sheet or their character sheet 30 minutes later, right? That's the goal of the channel. 1 hour until the game, I've got an idea, I want to know how to build it. Archetype builds. That's the pitch. So all this is I want to post videos that are interesting to you guys, that you guys, make you guys want to subscribe, make you guys want to share the channel around, so that when that new player out there in Kansas or Indiana or, in China or wherever else, when they are thinking like, oh, I've got this idea, my game's in an hour, what do I do? I want them to think archetype builds. I want them to know the name. So that's where all this is going. So here are some new series I've been considering to kind of like increase the range of the channel. So I could do a My Homebrew series, right? Archetype Homebrew or something like that. And this would be a lot more similar to like the Dale Kingsmill videos, which I have actually really loved it. And I started out listening to a lot more Dungeon Dudes and D4 and Pack Tactics. And I've started to find myself listening more and more to people like Dale Kingsmill or Ginny D, who are kind of all about making the game their own and about adding their own creativity to that game. So I have homebrewed subclasses for my games at home. I've homebrewed monsters. I've homebrewed mechanics. I've homebrewed various campaigns and one-shots. And I can do videos about all of that, right? I can do videos about my Luck Cleric and my Oath of Fate Paladin that I used for a campaign centered around a luck god. I can walk through kind of how I homebrewed races for a Christmas one-shot. I can talk about, the ways that I've customized monsters to handle larger parties or to scale with the size of the party. So I'm happy to do a homebrew series on things that I have homebrewed. I am not a game designer. I would have loved to be one. I put in some applications when I was unemployed at the start of this year. That's when I was making a lot of videos like crazy. And but that is not my training, and that's not really where I have a lot of expertise. So it's very possible that series is not as helpful to you as someone like Dale, who works all day on stuff like this and works on Ghostfire Gaming and is coming to this with like a very well-honed perspective. With that said, what I see from Dungeon Dudes, what I see from Dale Kingsmill is pretty much just vibe-based changes. Like, these are people who are like, what would be neat? Okay, we're going to just do the neat thing. Design process. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that because it's, you know, a game based on action. So so that empowers me to say, listen, maybe my ideas are not inherently worse. And to be completely honest, I think I do ride a good line between the optimization community and the the more homebrewy stuff. So, you know, for instance, and no shade at all, Pack Tactics is an incredible channel, a very influential, you know, part of the community. But like, can you imagine Pack Tactics doing a video about like homebrewing, you know, combat mechanics? He's just such a like a lawful, neutral guy, where he's like, these are the constraints that are around me. I am going to like find out where there's a weak link and go for it. And the idea of him forging his own chain is crazy. And so I do think I would be a good middle ground there, just in terms of like making classes that are balanced, but also really thematically fit the concept I'm going for, or monsters that are, you know, turned up to 11 mechanically, but also are very still thematically consistent and cool and cinematic. So yeah, I definitely have a lot of homebrew that I have done for my games. I'd love to share it with you. If that's something you'd be interested in, I'd be happy to make those videos as well. And then I was considering a Steal That Set Piece series. So this is similar to a homebrew thing, but is a lot more like those. There's some folks out there who are selling these like scenarios or these one-shots that you can pick up and just add to your games as needed. They can like fit into the adventure. So if your players are chasing a MacGuffin and you just don't really care what the obstacles are between them and that MacGuffin, you can grab one of these one shots and just kind of put your MacGuffin in the main chamber. And they've already done all the monster work, all of the mechanics, all the DCs and stuff like that. So it's a DM aid. And so I've considered doing that, but just with individual battle sets. So essentially, you know, here is, you know, this temple that they're doing a ritual in, and these platforms move around, and here's how the ritual progresses, and just hand you that set piece so that you can stage a battle there with your campaign. And doing that for like ocean caverns or for, you know, haunted, you know, shacks or something like that. Essentially, it's like you can find battle maps online relatively easily, but they don't always come with like in the environmental hazards that would go with that. What are the DCs? What makes combat interesting? How do you position your mobs in such a way to take advantage of that environment? So there are third-party published content that is similar to this, but I've obviously, all DMs have done work like this on our own games. So just packaging that, putting together the tips, and making a video about a given set piece and doing that over and over again. That's another series that I've been considering, and would be interested in whether you guys would want to pick that up. You know, would you want to see those videos and add that to your games, or if making this stuff that's part of the fun for you DMing. And that is also part of, you can see the new series have a theme, right? And that's, they're more oriented towards DMs than players, right? Players are not homebrewing new subclasses. Players are not designing the battle maps for combats. These are DM tools. And so part of that is like, you know, do I want to dip my toes into more of the DM side of things? And I have, you know, in my personal experience, is mostly DMing with D&D. Even if I was in 3 campaigns and I was only DMing one of them, most of my time would be spent DMing, because it just takes that much. I spend that much time out of game. So I think it'd be interesting to do more videos about DMing, about DM tools, that kind of thing. But I'm also aware that DMs represent a minority of the player base. So, you know, if most of the people who watch these videos are like not DMs and not interested in DM tools, then maybe that's not a good use of my time. So let me know. Whew, okay. So let's talk about the difficult conversation, which is actual play. So on one hand, I do run campaigns, and I also run a lot of one-shots. Most of my friends are much more comfortable signing up for a one-shot and dedicating, a Saturday to playing D&D than they are to saying, yes, I will be able to be there every Saturday for 3 hours, for the next 6 months, right? People just in adult life are not able necessarily to commit to that on a regular basis. But if I tell them, hey, this is just going to happen the one time and we're going to be done by the end of the day, I get lots of volunteers. If I wanted to, I could probably run a one shot every weekend for forever with just a rotating cast of people if I had the energy to do that. So, a lot of the actual play community is dominated by these long running narrative campaigns. There's obviously Critical Role, which is like the far end of the spectrum. There's got to be thousands and thousands of hours of Critical Role campaign content out there with professional voice actors and a professional set and, real advertisements and a whole mini collection. So that is like, there's that, right? So maybe there's room for more punchy, digestible, almost movie style one shots and to be honest, I happen to find my friends in my home games are pretty fun, and they are way more on the fun side of things. They're way more towards that like Dimension 20 dropout, like everyone is laughing almost all the time, and there's serious beats, but there's mostly a lot of like really funny, interesting dynamics and characters going on. We've got some great role players at my table, and so I think they would actually be very entertaining to watch. But my biggest issues towards doing actual play is tech and demand. So on the tech side, I think we can all agree that the best actual plays, no matter the length of the campaign or the style or whatever else, they've all got individual cameras. So they've got cameras pointed at each person, and they can kind of cut between them as that moment is relevant. And they've all got individual microphones to capture their audio without getting a bunch of background noise and everybody else. It also requires a set. You've got to have a physical location that's filmed. I realize that like this blank wall would be just fine, but like you do have to like build out a set that people can sit at, and it can be filmed from every angle. So in order to set up and do an actual play, even to start, just minute one, probably $2,000 worth of equipment and setup and labor, and that is budget. That trust me, that is I run the numbers. That is a low number. $2,000 is very small. For reference, I think Matt Colville raised like $25,000 before they started their actual play in Kickstarter money, right? Because they did like a real setup, and mine would probably be a lot jankier than that. But also he's just at that level where if he did anything less than a professional job, it would be a disappointment. But yeah, I mean, it would be a huge investment just to get started in tech and everything else. And so my question when I'm considering that choice is like, is that something people want to watch? Are people really clamoring for more actual play content? Because there's a lot of really good games out there. Like there's a lot of D&D, and D&D tends to be very high on the very high payoff for creators, right? Because you sit down, you don't need the DM preps, but you don't need to do as much prep as like a TV show or making a YouTube video even, and you get like 2 to 3 hours of content out of that, right? So, and sure, there's some of the actual plays do a lot of editing, switching on the close-ups and stuff like that, but it's a very lucrative field to get into, and that's why a lot of people have done it. And now there are dozens and dozens of high-profile actual play campaigns going on every week. And they're all multi-hour episodes. And so the question is, like, why would you watch mine? Why would a person sit down and watch me and my friends playing D&D when there's 100 other people who are also playing D&D this week, who are professional comedians or professional actors, or have been doing this for a decade, and so they've nailed their group dynamic and whatever else. And for that matter, why wouldn't you just tab over to Netflix or Amazon Prime and like watch a TV show instead? So I don't really have an answer to that question. And until I do have an answer to that question, until I have like, this is the reason why it's worth you watching, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to invest the time and the money, and I'm not going to ask my friends to put themselves out there. They have volunteered. I have had friends like say like, oh, we should live stream our games. I would love to do that. Put a mic on me and we'll do it. And I said no, because I just don't think that the effort required to make it good, I think is not going to be worthwhile, because I think there's already so many good games out there that people are playing and loving. Go watch Desi Quest. Desi Quest just started coming out. That looks like an incredible campaign. Dimension 20's always got something cooking. Junior Year is coming out soon, and I'm stoked for to get caught up. Go watch the pros do what they do, and then huge shout out Worlds Beyond Number. Worlds Beyond Number. Just listen to it. Just go and listen to that. And I think like, if I'm going to put myself there and say, no, don't listen to the new Worlds Beyond Number episode, listen to me and my friends, I'm never going to be able to make that comparison. So that's where I am on actual play content. It's a tempting proposition. I think I'm probably not going to go there until I can have an answer to the question, like, why would you watch this and not anything else that you could do? So that's about it for my plans for the future of the channel. We didn't get a ton of folks in the chat today, but that's okay. So I don't really have any feedback from people or questions or anything like that to go into. So I guess I will cut it here. Thanks for joining me. A bit of a obviously, this was a little bit more rambly, because that's just the style of video that we were going for. My birthday gift to myself was not needing to do too much editing on this. I'm not putting in a bunch of clips and inserts and pictures. And that's for me, that's for my time. So thank you for watching. If you do decide to watch this when it goes out on the channel, sorry about the quality. We'll be back with more of these videos in the future. And I hope you're excited for the future of Archetype Builds.